Do we want to go through and do introductions, at least to have it on the record who's here today? Why not? Stuart Wagner, Chairman of the Transit Advisory Committee. And we'll head that way and go this way.
Me next. Brett Gant, Town Council.
Kurt Pfeiffer, Withers Ravenel.
Nick Bryant, Downtown Business Owner.
Andrew Working, Downtown Business.
David Yoakum, member of the committee.
Linda Barrett with Wake Med.
Amanda Bunce, current planning manager.
Lauren System Planning Tech.
And Katie Schwing, Transit Planner.
Gang's all here. So first order of business is the meeting minutes from January. It was the January 17th meeting. We have a requested action to approve the meeting minutes from that date. Assuming everybody's had a chance to read the minutes, they're also in this packet today. Any conversation about approving them? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So motion.
Second?
Second.
So moved and seconded. The meeting minutes have been approved. Moving on. Revision to rules of procedure document. Is this?
So this is where I have
This
a
is where-
request
Okay.
for the committee. The folks from the clerk's office who were going to present these items
Right.
have both had unexpected conflicts come up today. So they are not going to be here to present these items. I would like to answer questions, but I'm not actually the expert on these items. So what we will likely need to do to keep some of these proposed actions moving forward is set a special meeting.
There was some talk about an August meeting. Do we want to discuss the possible date now?
If you would like to do that now, we can just add it as it's just an agenda item to discuss a special meeting, or we can do it in other business.
Okay. I think it's probably worthwhile to go ahead and discuss that now and possibly have that on the books. Are there any dates that are completely out? I know that I have no availability in the second week of August. I guess we'd be looking for a Wednesday.
Yeah, so it runs with the date, so it would be, like the 14th or the 21st or the 28th
Okay.
of August, if you all are okay with the 4 p.m. time slot as well.
Is the 21st or 28th a possibility for everyone?
Just one moment.
Might need to check that there's no conflict with Parks and Rec on the 28th. I think they meet the last Wednesday of each month. Oh, but not till 6, so that shouldn't conflict, because they don't hear, and we'll be back in our regular space by then, maybe.
Hopefully.
So
I can
That's a
do
good
it.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm aside from the first week of August, I'm out. So
You're
I've got two
Unavailable.
kids moving to App State on 2 separate weeks, and then last week of August I'm at a family wedding in Maryland. So
gotcha.
I'm
Is the
out.
7th an option? Or you said the 7th?
7th is fine with me.
Works for me too.
It's the 12th through the 16th that I'm unavailable.
I'm fine with the 7th.
The 7th?
I can't do the 7th, I'm sorry.
I actually had a question because my term expires at the end of the month. I mean, because might be recommending, do you still want my participation in that meeting, or is it
Yeah.
still relevant for me to be here?
So my understanding from Alan is that you are able to, if you are so interested, to continue your term until a new person is nominated in your place.
I'm more than willing to do that.
Okay. And it's up to you.
And the 7th works for me. Yeah.
Okay.
So the only possibility is Linda, you can't be here.
I can't do the 7th, I'm sorry.
If it makes more sense for the committee to do a week that I'm not available, I can maybe circle back with you, Katie, or the other folks for clarity on those items if I need to.
On the same thing. I mean, 7th works for everybody. I can do any of the other dates.
So am I hearing the 21st? All around the room? August 21st. 4 o'clock?
Okay, and I'll send out an agenda ahead of time.
That'd be great.
For that meeting. And yeah, we would be looking to cover those administrative items.
Okay. And I would imagine that item number 4 is also postponed. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so skipping those items, we can go on to what was number 6, if you're okay with that.
Sure, that's fine. This is our transportation prioritization study, and you're up, Katie.
Okay, I'm gonna skip through a bunch of slides. Okay, so this is really just a debrief about the public engagement that we had this spring in the information gathering phase of our transit prioritization study. Many of you are, provided lots of input on what became the survey questions. And so we went ahead and went through with the administration and outreach portion. So the survey, there was an online survey as well as an on-board survey that were slightly different. The online survey was open to anyone who was interested to participate, and it was opened in late March and ran through May 15th. We had a total of 920 participants. Not every participant answered every question. It was open to as much as they preferred to answer. And I sent out a summary report, which is just an output from the survey tool that just summarized the responses we received. And we are also working on putting this into a Power BI dashboard for folks to look through. But there were kind of 3 main sections of the survey. One, just to gauge folks' quick awareness of the services that are available in our area. Then the second part was just to gauge what their priorities were for transit in our area. And then the third section was gathering demographic info about the respondents. So I was thinking we could just kind of go through the highlights of the survey results. I know some of you probably have looked through them already. Some may not have. So the first question, I gotta stay by the mic, sorry. The first question was just generally, are you aware of the following services that operate in Apex? And 80% of people who took the survey said yes for Go Apex Route 1, which is high, but when you think about the fact that we're trying to reach people who already live in Apex pretty much with our outreach, people who are already on the email list for transit services, things like that. It's interesting that 20% said no.
One thing that jumped out on the awareness questions for me was, what is the differentiation between, obviously the onboard survey respondents are all going to respond yes to those, right? So
If they respond no, we've got a problem.
do we have that breakdown, like of the non-rider survey respondents, like how aware they are of these things?
I don't have that, mostly because the questions are different. So there's not really a one-to-one comparison between them. But I can prepare something that approximates that and send that out to you guys for your own, comparisons. But yeah, there were some pretty big differences in the things that we can kind of compare between the two. And I can give a quick summary of the onboard when we get to the slides too.
Before you go any further, Katie, I don't see any breakdown either of who was a resident and who wasn't a resident on the next page. So is that something that you can tell us real quick before you proceed?
Yeah, what I could do instead of going through these slides is just hop to our Power BI dashboard. So our GIS specialist in our office has been working on this, and it's still considered a draft version. It's not ready to go out to the public, but we wanted to go ahead and show it to you guys so that you could see it. We could go, where do we want to go? Priorities. You can look by the respondent's home region. So you can select whatever regions you want. We have 12 areas within what we call the Apex area, which is basically Apex plus EPJ and our zone of planning influence, I guess you could call it. And then the folks who either didn't respond to that question or said they live outside of Apex. But we only have this mapping feature for this page right now about what folks' top destinations were. But yeah, this page has the questions we were just talking about. And let me find the one, where do you live? Here we go. So these are the folks that responded, and it looks like the responses that we have were all from folks in Apex.
Okay.
So, yeah. Oh wait, this is how often you write. This is not your awareness.
They were in the survey at that point, so that gives us a good idea.
Yeah, so this is still a draft. So once this is final, we will be sending it out to you. I just don't have it right now. But the vast majority of people were responding from the Apex area. There weren't a ton of people who were outside of Apex who responded.
Yeah, back to that 80-20% split, there's also a significant number of people who are just professional survey takers. I mean, I think, I know that I'm guilty of this. I'll take a survey just to take a survey. So that number, while it seems to be high, that 20%, I don't think that's a point of frustration or concern.
You know, for a brand new service with, in the grand scheme of things, not a whole lot of marketing, I think an 80% awareness rate is very good. So it's interesting that you guys are, and you, Katie, as well, are kind of queuing on that 20% as being an indicator, you know, some kind of negative indicator. Like maybe you could explain, Stuart and Katie, your perspective on that, because I'm seeing it kind of opposite way.
No, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think the 80% is what we should be talking about. I think you're always going to have, in any metric, you're going to have something that's going to show up as red or yellow instead of green. And one of the things I've learned working for my boss is when you have a meeting, you spend time talking about the green things. And if questions come up about the red and yellow, then you try to answer them, but hopefully you don't have to. But I think the 20% is it's not insignificant, but by the same token, I think it's explainable with exactly what you said. The newness of the service, it's not been something that's been, you know, it has been marketed, but not in a way that, you know, shows up, you know, in 22-second segments at during Wheel of Fortune. So I think we should focus on the 80% of the people that did respond. I completely agree.
Unless you're Coca-Cola, Levi's, Disney, or Harley Davidson, having only 1 in 5 people not know who you are is pretty darn good. From my perspective.
Yeah, and I don't think I have a slide for this, but I would guess that about a quarter of our respondents responded after we sent out an email to our transit plans and services and long-range planning email list. Another quarter approximately said they got it through Facebook, which is either the town or one of the town pages.
It was publicized on the Apex Community Forum group, which is a very large group on Facebook. So, and just from the commentary that occurs on that page, would be certain that the majority of folks on there are not active transit participants. So, it's good that it was advertised there.
And then
So you said about 3/4 of the respondents hit after the email blast to the transit-related email lists.
about 1/4,
Oh, okay.
and then another 1/4, we're pretty sure from Facebook. And then the kind of second half is everything else, which was result of flyering places, giving notices to some of our like social services adjacent providers in the area, like Western Wayne Crisis Ministries, the White Oak Foundation. I did some canvassing around town at various businesses and things. So I mailed a letter specifically to the Go Apex door-to-door, and anyone who had interacted with Go Wake Access Services. So, like we just kind of did a scattering of anyone we thought would be interested, but we didn't do a ton of just like wide general public ads. We did one in Suburban Living, which I think got some of the early responses too. But yeah, we didn't do any like radio spots or anything like that for this survey. So because it was an online survey, and we did have a channel card in the bus asking folks in the bus to take this, but most of our respondents were not riders of any of the area services. But about 20% of the people who responded had ridden Go Apex Route 1 previously, which is more than the general population.
Mm-hmm.
So this question kind of jumped out at me too, in that we've got a really high level of awareness, but a very low level of regular ridership on Route 1. So that's kind of a big indicator, for me, of where we might find an opportunity for some impactful marketing or outreach. What is it specifically about the service that everyone knows about that isn't compelling enough to make them use it? Kind of the question that it begs for me.
I mean, it's not frequent enough and it didn't go enough places, right? And to me, that's obvious. That's the reason. Those two things.
I mean, yeah, we can see that and presume probably safely, but do we know?
I think it's not just lack of places, it's also frequency. I think the combination of the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the two that make up 90% of the lack of ridership, and the balance of those I don't know, and I've been intrigued by that question, but I think it's the combination of both, maybe equally. But and I'm not sure the survey really elucidates that. There was some preferences of what they want to see that might have helped that. I did study it, but I didn't study it that hard.
This might be, if we do future surveys, one of these if-then kind of question opportunities. If you know about it, but you don't ride it, then why? What would make you ride it?
So I'm going to skip forward to, sorry, this is not the most pretty page to look at. But we did sort of ask what factors, I'm sorry, I'm skipping forward. And your handouts don't have the right slide numbers on them. But we did ask folks what would make them more likely to ride, and gave a variety of different options, or how important each of the following conditions would be for them. And I thought this was kind of interesting, let's see, I'm gonna try to find frequent service is the top of the second column. 28% said it would be required for me to consider riding. And we don't have frequent service as defined by this question right now. So that might be some of those folks. 30 minutes or
Looks
shorter.
like the big one was reliability, or a perception of whether or not it would be, they could count on it. Which, I think we do a great job of.
I think the general public, though, doesn't understand the difference between reliability and frequency.
Yeah.
They're answering the question for potentially for frequency.
They're just thinking in terms of how many times do I go past that bus stop and I don't see a bus,
Yeah.
or I see someone waiting, kind of thing. That makes sense.
It's reliable and that it's not available the second that they want it.
And then looks like safety
Safety is a concern.
was a big one.
81%.
81%.
Yeah.
That's intriguing.
And safe and convenient walking path. So all three of those right there really kind of speak to that safety issue. This is really tiny. I'm getting old.
I know, I'm sorry. I did send this out in a PDF that you can look at as well, like later if you have particular questions. But yeah, so the safety one did pop out, and Shannon and I were talking briefly about this, and we do have a significant number of our riders who are younger, like middle or high school age, and a significant number of people who filled out the survey indicated that they had kids aged 12 to 18 in their household. So we think, we're just guessing that might be part of why that was so highly selected.
But they're not saying that they think that's a problem, right?
Yeah, they're not necessarily
Just
saying
something
it's
that they would want to be true.
yes. Yeah.
I think it goes in series where they need either frequency or it to be close, or both, and then the other factors that they're assuming you have those things first, and then the safety and the bus stop, bus racks, all these things that are kind of, in my opinion, kind of secondary things, I think can play a role as well. But I took the survey and I imagine myself like living near a bus stop, and then how would I answer the questions after that, personally, which I assume was common.
Just as a sidebar, Katie, this is really good data. Like, this is usable in lots of different ways to inform a lot of discussion and decision. So thank you guys for putting this together.
I think it also puts us in a position that if you had to pull together 10 bullet points about why GOA Picture Art 1 is important, I mean, I think you've got solid numbers that you can base these bullet points on, which is always a good marketing tool.
Yeah, and because this is sort of our baseline, we weren't quite sure what we were going to get from people. But now that we kind of know this, we can maybe next year, refine the questions to get a little bit better over time about what exactly we can do.
It was a lot of questions too. I mean, I have to commend people for sticking with the survey.
Yeah. And then we did ask folks so I'm just hopping around here at this point, about like if we should, target particular users for the service. It was pretty close, but the two top things that people selected were focusing on options for low-income residents and for seniors, which I think makes sense if you had to focus. But not many people seemed to have their top option be commuters.
There were 2/3 of respondents said commuters, or am I not? Does that say 66%?
That's local community.
Yeah, so a lot of people selected everything, but it wasn't necessarily their top choice. And this doesn't do a great job of
I see what
explaining
you're
that,
saying.
but yeah. So there's kind of a weighted rank on the right side that kind of gets at how these are ordered.
And we're going to get to it, but the local commuters question on the onboard thing was totally different. Most of them were going to work. And I linked that in my head to this and saying these people obviously don't ride the bus because they'd be riding for different reasons than the people who are actually riding the bus right now are riding.
Interesting.
And then I'll do this quickly. I have a map that I can share later that I don't have access to right now that shows all the places that people pinpointed about where they wanted to see it as destinations. But a lot of them are the places that are already fairly accessible on Go Apex Route 1, which is good from that perspective. But I think there's just a lot of people who don't live on the bus line who would still like to go to those places. They just can't access a bus stop from where they are coming from. But yeah, downtown Apex was number 1. Retail areas with superstores was number 2. Public parks and community centers was number 3. You know, and it kind of just goes down the way you would expect, I would think. I'm gonna skip back forward.
Katie, from the map feature, do you have a top 3 or 5 places that they pinpointed that are not served by Route 1?
I think one of the big ones was Apex Community Park and Apex Pleasant Park were both selected by a lot of folks. Trying to think if there's anywhere. There were a few people who were looking for like the Food Lion and Aldi near Jenks Road and 55. And a couple people who live in those like apartments and townhomes that are along 55 north of
And that was an
64.
area I think it came off at the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was just like the areas you would think around town that already have transit near them. It was a lot of downtown. High school, Friendship High School was another one that several people selected that we don't have.
Did the library come up in that?
The library did come up, yeah.
Remember, I guess it must have been during one of the meet and greets on the street. A lot of people talked about having access to the library. That was a big topic on the, I don't know what fair, what we did, which I don't think it might have been Peak Fest. I can't remember which one it was. It was fairly frequent.
And then this is just demographic information. We didn't quite get a representative sample from the demographics point of view. We tended to skew basically whiter and higher income than the actual population of Apex, which is just something to note. And, you know, we didn't, probably a lot of those came from our early, like online outreach bursts. And so it's a lesson for us to kind of keep working at as we continue to do this. We also had a lot of people, I didn't compare this closely to Apex's actual numbers, but we got a lot of working age people, you know, of course, not a lot of younger people, and more female than male representation in the respondents. This gets at income. It's not the best map to look at but, or graph to look at, but basically it skews over median income. And then 8% of folks, we asked the question, does anyone in your household age 16 or older have a disability that prevents them from driving alone at any point? And 8% said yes. So it's just worth noting. So we can discuss further, but I can also go on to the onboard survey results.
So just real quick, and this is just kind of a for future consideration type of comment. The demographic information kind of indicates to me that there's an opportunity to do some, targeted specific surveying. Like we know from one of the earlier questions that, seniors, low-income individuals, and the younger ridership are three groups that could most benefit. So it would be worthwhile to know specifically what their priorities and motivations would be. How we engage them, I don't know, but just putting that out there. It would be nice to see when we survey again if we can tailor something specific for those groups.
Yeah, I was thinking, haven't gotten much further than that, about doing a series of focus groups, especially for the younger folks. We can't really solicit them in many other ways, like to give us information about themselves. So we have a group that's organized through, I think, Parks and Rec, that's like the Apex Youth Council, that basically does volunteer work. And I reached out to them and they seemed open to the idea of doing some focus groups and things like that about the service. Just haven't really had the capacity to get that implemented. And the senior center as well, we might be able to work with them. We also have specialized recreation programs, which are recreation programs that are tailored to folks with disabilities. So I've been kind of like putting out feelers for trying to connect with those resources, but haven't really done anything yet. So yeah, it could be a start for getting those other points of view.
Is there a way to show up at a middle school or high school for an assembly or whatever they call them now? Even a half-hour time slot where you just talk to the population at large, throw out a bunch of spongy buses and thermal bags and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that, if you're doing a focus group with attendees at a youth council or the segment that is already engaged in some sort of community service capacity, you kind of miss a broader spectrum of younger people that would probably be more representative of their true preferences and needs. So I think that would be a good idea if we could get into a high school and have them select, 5-10 people from each grade or whatever, even if it's random. You get a real spectrum of people to provide their perspective.
That's a good idea. And I know Jenna has worked quite a bit with the leadership at the schools on the Safe Routes to School project, so she would have the contact information and everything for, I think, all the schools in our area. So we can kind of talk through how we might be able to do that. But yeah, I'll make it.
I know they've done Safe Routes. This is something completely different, but I don't want to lose it. I know they've done a lot of work in sidewalk improvement and doing all of these improvements for people that walk to school. It would be useful, I think, in our planning to see where they are and what's upcoming that could be useful to inform our prioritizations going forward.
And start a new campaign in schools, just say go. I mean, you need to put a pin on it, so.
In the meantime, I absolutely agree that you hit certain segments of kids who are already engaged, certainly understand that, but like the Girl Scout group that came and
Yeah.
did their survey, and I know the Apex Chamber has a leadership youth group as well. I think there are probably several that we could tap into that maybe they could reach out, and that could be in the meantime if we're not able to actually go to the schools. At least it would give us more information than we, have on this baseline. I think there are several leadership groups we might can tap into. The YMCA's do some, and I think would be, absolutely an expectation to ask us to help get that out when the time comes, that we can be proactive and help you with that.
It sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, we're glad to help connect and that kind of thing as we're looking for more people. Because there are survey takers, and there's some that you just have to ask, will you fill this out? We'd love your input. Or do you have access to, a broad spectrum, and would they fill it out? Most people will if you make the specific ask.
So guys, the way I see this survey and just our transit kind of future plans in general, there's a lot of these categories, and they're kind of a matrix of things that people, the reasons for riding the bus, and I think it kind of ranges from recreation to like shopping and whatever to like commuting, and there's kind of a frequency of those things. There's also kind of a willingness to ride the bus for the population. I think most people in this town are probably not going to ride the bus usually, unless it's like really compelling reason to. And I think so there's that. There's like the ages of people that we're talking about, try and target the people with disabilities or younger people. And I think this data can kind of inform where we think we kind of land as a town, and like now and in the future. And that can inform the choices we make and recommend as far as frequency or where it goes or the bus stop improvements. I think all these things can kind of go into kind of a big graph or a series of graphs, and help inform how we're going to proceed. And I think you guys are the experts, I think, in how it could work in Apex from your knowledge about transit in general. So I think these things all combined can really help give us a path forward together. Because I think a lot of people are just like, I just want to go to the parks, and I'll do that on the weekends, and probably not gonna do it for shopping because I don't, unless it's every 30 minutes or every hour is fine for the park. It's bad for shopping because if you get shopping done in 20 minutes, you're not gonna want to take the bus and wait around. So I just think all these things and how we want this thing to be in the future, and I think it's going to have to cover all those areas, frankly, in some kind of ratio to be a popular thing to do in Apex.
And I think we're really fortunate that we had such a broad spectrum of questions on this survey to inform us with as many data points as we could possibly get to come up with what will be a very well-informed decision going forward.
Yeah.
So Katie, on both the broader survey and the rider or the onboard survey, the majority of respondents were female. Do we know, is that typical for surveys? Do we know?
I'm not sure about online surveys, but my memories from previous transit rider surveys is that transit skews slightly more female.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Does this indicate that we have a majority, a significant, 20% majority female ridership, at least according to the survey? So that was question one, so thank you for that answer. And then question two, really more of an observation, and this was surprising to me, our largest age demographic of riders is 16 to 24. Mm-hmm. So that's 27% of the ridership, and that's only an 8-year span, as compared to the seniors 59 to 99, which is a 40-year age span, and that represents only 25% of our ridership. So like for like size age groups, that younger demographic is by far our highest demographic of age demographic of ridership. That was surprising. I thought it would be the opposite.
Yeah, and just to go into sort of the summary of our sample, like they didn't even ask people who looked like 16 or younger to fill out the survey. That was a chunk of people that or young who weren't surveyed. Yeah.
And do we, like every time someone gets on the bus, they get handed one of these things. So I'm sure we've got at least some kind of multiple respondents. Do we know how many of those roughly there might be? Or?
Yeah, so the idea was, so this is Mark. He was the guy who did the survey on the bus. He asked every person who boarded who looked 16 or older to fill out a survey, but not to fill it out if they've already filled it out. So unless somebody like skirted by and like really wanted to fill it out another time, it was pretty much folks who were just completing it that one time. And there were, you'll see, quite a few people who he approached who had already taken the survey, which is consistent with the results that we received from some of the questions. And then there were only a few other folks who either couldn't or wouldn't take the survey, who just didn't speak English or Spanish well enough to complete it. But yeah, so there were a lot of folks who boarded more than once during the time that Mark was on the bus. And he was on he did an 8-hour shift approximately for 7 days, so 56 hours total. And so Saturday was surveyed twice, once earlier, once later, and then either early, later, or middle of the day on Monday through Friday. So we tried to catch as many hours of the day and as many days of the week as we could to get a sample, but he could only do 8 hours a day, which we would not want him to do more than that. But yeah, so I'll skip the demographics for now, but one thing I wanted to point out is the results of the days per week using Go Apex, and 63% of the respondents, so of the 41 like actual pieces of paper that we got back, said they ride 4 or more days a week. So the people that are on the bus, I mean, it makes sense statistically, are riding a lot.
It's a loyalty thing. That's great.
Yeah. And there are some people that ride maybe once or twice a week, or maybe this is the first time they're riding, 12%, which is a significant amount. But it's one or the other, but most of the people who you're probably going to see on the bus at any given time are people who ride regularly. And then 64% said their usual trip purpose was work, which is pretty consistent with transit in general. But yeah, not a lot of people going to the park, it's people going to work somewhere along the bus line or transferring. I'll get to that one in a minute. Oh, it's right next to it. Okay, so 37% of people who responded said they do transfer to Go Cary, Go Triangle, or both, which is higher than I was expecting. It's a significant number of folks who are transferring to other places and also ride Go Apex. 65% of the respondents said they did not have a vehicle available for the trip. And 13% said they had a disability that prevents them from driving. Their most common trip origin was home, which is not unusual. And most folks were going either home or to work. There were some, he picked up kids that were coming home from school, but no kids that were going to school on the bus.
It kind of speaks to that perception of reliability, possibly.
Yeah, you might want to, you know, hang out with your friends after school, so you take the bus somewhere, but you're not necessarily using it to commute to school in the
Doesn't
morning.
mean that they either get dropped off at school or take a bus, the yellow bus, and then do the public transit theoretically in the afternoon.
Which could make sense if parents are still working.
And then about 50% of people said they do not use any apps on their cell phone for transit, but about half do. And 11% said they don't have a cell phone, which is higher than we would have expected. And then we asked about their satisfaction level with various aspects of the service that they were riding. So this is less kind of philosophical questions about the service. It's more about the service as it is today. And overall, people were pretty satisfied. The green is whether they responded they were totally satisfied. And the orange is they said they were fairly or mostly satisfied. And then everything else is blue, so whether they were neutral or dissatisfied in some way. So the good news is a lot of people were very or totally satisfied with the services, the aspects of the service. And then, you know, if we can glean some things about this, the thing that people were least satisfied about overall, or least totally satisfied about, was weekend service. Which we don't operate on Sundays. So that maybe indicated that folks would like to see that.
This is safety question stands out to me on this one because of the 3% that are dissatisfied with the safety of it. In other words, that they feel safe on it, yet it was a concern in the first portion. So I don't know if, is this still the 880?
Kind of speaks to that perception thing, right?
Yeah.
I think it's not safe, but those that ride it.
Are these factors from the 880, Katie?
Sorry, say that again.
Are these numbers, this graph that we're looking at from the 880?
Onboard.
This is from the onboard.
This is only,
survey.
yeah, exactly. So that's even better.
People who use it
Yeah.
think it's safe.
that right?
Perception, right?
I'm also impressed with the frequency of service numbers. I mean, that's 92% who, at some level, are satisfied with how often the bus comes around.
Yeah, frequency and locations are surprising. It's surprising to me that they ranked.
Yeah.
The locations, though, why would you ride a bus that was not convenient?
Yeah, it's missing the
So
missing the folks that would rate. low.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And the folks, I guess, that don't ride it because it doesn't go frequently enough,
Right.
wouldn't be in here. So,
Yeah, these are the survivors. Those first-time riders, some of them never come back probably.
4 to 5 times a week.
So, you know, this graphic kind of begs a question. You know, what is an acceptable level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction with each of these things for riders of Route 1? You know, a standard would be, you know, kind of 2/3 of people say that it's acceptable or they're satisfied with it, that you're kind of meeting a reasonable level of expectation there. So a question for this committee or for the town might be, you know, what's an acceptable threshold for us? You know, if you use that 2/3 kind of standard, then that really gets you down all the way through the total time it takes you for your usual trip. Like all of those we would consider to be, you know, we're delivering an acceptable level of service for those particular things, if we were to use that 2/3 standard. So just something to ponder, maybe discuss now or table for later, but you know, I think it would be worthwhile for us to kind of set an expected threshold for these particular things. And really maybe to go through and perhaps after some introspection, think about, you know, does this list of things here really cover everything we want to poll our riders about, or are there perhaps other aspects of the service that we didn't really dive into well enough here? I don't know the answer to any of that. I'm just throwing these out as questions that maybe we should discuss.
Yeah, and I can compare to other agencies who have done these as well to see if there is kind of an industry standard, because a lot of these questions are asked, you know, by multiple agencies around the country. So I can bring that back as well.
A complementary approach, maybe, particularly if it starts to do the survey over time, is if there's someone who rides the bus once, maybe some of this is already in the online survey data, like they're kind of interesting to think about, because you've kind of, they don't have a marketing problem. They had some incentive to want to try it. Why didn't they go a second time? And then the second version would be, if you are doing this over time, if you start to see people stopping use, how would they answer these kind of questions? Is there anything that sort of jumps out as the rationale of what kind of tipped them back to being a non-rider?
I think the Wi-Fi question is very interesting as well. People either really liked it or really didn't like it.
It takes one day for it to not work. And
Yeah.
38% it must have not been working that day.
As an old person, I think that's overrated, quite frankly. If I'm getting on a bus, I'm not there for the Wi-Fi.
And then there was a question about like what aspects of service they thought were most important to improve, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they thought they were the worst, but what was most important to them when riding. But we did see, you know, the clear winner here is weekend service again, from these folks that are riding. So I think that's worth noting. And then for the folks who are riding, this contrasts a little bit with the online survey that the availability of shelters or seats at bus stops was important to them.
Frequency did rank higher on this one. Maybe that's a tell there.
But again, are they confusing frequency with reliability?
I don't know. But then service to locations here was very low, which is consistent with the results from the previous question. But frequency did pop up here. I think the difference might be notable.
Okay, so that was it for the on-board survey. I did also want to give you an update on the remix analysis. And I'm actually just going to go into the actual site to kind of show you where I'm at so far. I have a spreadsheet going that I don't have access to right now, but is compiling all of this stuff, and will kind of serve as an easy way for us to compare between our service scenarios. So it's basically, this is where we're keeping our routing information. I've built out scenarios for different for basically the service that we have currently, the service that is planned for FY25, the service that is planned for FY27, based on the Wake Transit plans that we have in our area. And then I'm starting to work on other options, but trying to make them as realistic as possible with the real patterns of the routing and the service that's provided. So we have, you know, Go Apex Route 1 right now with our patterns and bus stops. Basically what I'm doing is comparing the coverage areas of the different routes along with costs and like number of people served. So we can get an idea of like who we're serving, what different options, what level of service they have access to on what days of week and things like that. And so basically you can glean a lot of information about your underlying population because they go ahead and add in census data to this, and then the software goes ahead and has a way of kind of aggregating based on the distance to bus stops.
And this presumes no change to frequency of service or number of routes or anything, right? It's just if you keep this one route with a target of a 1 hour, is that kind of?
Yeah, so this doesn't give you a ridership estimate for the fixed route service. It basically gives you who has access to the service.
Okay, thank you.
And so like we've added in, you know, the service that will have hourly on Route 305 in FY25 or Route 311 in FY27. We also have, and I'm just clicking in and out, I'm gonna close some of these off. You know, some possible other routing ideas that we could compare against, where we're going to different areas, and see how much more population we can capture at what cost. So I don't have the comparison to show, but I am working on it. And when I do have that, I can send that out to you guys to review.
Can you force the software to connect roads that will connect in the future?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not on this one, but I was experimenting with Pleasant Park because they didn't have the roads on there yet.
Okay.
So you just kind of have to draw it yourself. Yeah.
It'll allow you to do a route that's strong. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that was all I had for that item.
Okay. Transit map amendments.
Okay. And if you don't mind, can I introduce someone really quick?
Absolutely.
Okay. So sitting in our audience right now is Paul Black from Go Triangle. He can provide a lot more detail about what this proposal actually is for a transit plan map amendment. Would you like to present, or would you like me to?
You're ready to go, so I'll let Katie handle it.
Okay.
But I'm here to answer questions.
So Paul, can you give me your title? I'm sorry.
Oh, what am I? I'm a principal planner.
See ya.
Paul is a principal planner with Go Triangle, and he works, I think, mostly on the capital side with bus stops and things like that, but this is relevant, and I can explain why that is. Oops, I think I gotta go back to my slide. Look away if you get dizzy. Okay, so as you all know, Go Triangle Route 305 serves the Apex area. They are actually, it's been on the books for a while to consider actually changing the routing of Route 305 in the Pine Plaza Drive area. I'm going to go ahead and skip to a map just to help you orient. So what you have is coming north on Laura Duncan Road, Route 305 takes a right onto US 64, then makes a left onto Shepherd's Vineyard Drive, where it serves what's called the park and ride lot, spot on Shepherd's Vineyard, makes a right on Pine Plaza Drive, a right on Lake Pine Drive, and then back to 64. And then the opposite direction it makes that same loop from Shepherd's Vineyard to Pine Plaza to Lake Pine, but then goes south to Laura Duncan. And Go Triangle has been considering changing the routing to go up Laura Duncan to Pine
accommodate
Plaza.
Costco.
There's very little need for that.
Yeah,
I mean, who's gonna ride the bus to Costco? I mean, it's not like you can bring home your 42 gallons of laundry detergent on the bus.
Yeah, so this is less about serving Costco
Yeah.
and more about getting our bus out of the unprotected left across 64.
Yes,
It's really a
absolutely.
safety issue for our operations folks. So we've got three major things that we still have to contend with. There's a lot of trade-offs in this part of the route. The first big one is we were asked by the town to pull our stop at Lake Pine and Pine Plaza around the corner. There's no sidewalk on Pine Plaza right now, and there's a retention pond and a large slope right behind us. It's going to be difficult to improve that to ADA compliance standards. So we're going to try it. Our operations folks are a little leery about having the inbound bus going into Raleigh, being able to make that right, get back over to the curb to pick up and drop off passengers, and then get back out to make the left onto inbound 64. So we're going to go ahead and move the sign as part of our service change, but we're going to evaluate it when we're there. We may end up doing something different. But as we looked at all of the trade-offs at that location, that seemed to be the best one. And from the town's perspective, got the passengers closer to the shopping center entrance. Another one is we have a time point that will move from the current shelter there at 1720. Is it the, yeah, hey, look at that. It's sad that I know that without even having to look. To where 1263 is. Now that's a 2-lane, but there's 36 feet of pavement curb to curb. We think that's plenty of room for folks to get by a bus if it's having to wait there to get the clock back with the rest of the schedule. The one unknown is we know there's a lot of trucks that use that as a back way into Costco. So we're gonna go ahead and do it, but we'll evaluate it. Worst case, we can move a time point. We wouldn't do that during the trial period until the shelters moved for park and ride customers. Right now, we know a lot of people wait in their cars because it's more comfortable, and when they see the bus pull up, they get out and they walk up. It's not a tremendously busy park and ride, and we think we can just handle it that way until the shelter's moved. Once the shelter's moved, we'd be able to assess if we like that as a time point or not. And then the biggest one, and one we might actually ask the town for a little help with, is being able to make the left, the outbound left, onto Lara Duncan. We looked at that, and it's still a better trade-off than making the unprotected left on 64. It's about even, but we might end up looking at trying to get the speed limit reduced coming into the intersection. Right now it's posted 45. We might ask DOT to post that as 35. We'd ask for the town's help with that if we choose to go that route. Potentially even looking at a signal or at least a flasher at that location in the short term.
It's a stop sign right now.
yeah. And it's actually a very difficult intersection because you pull way out to make the left if you're a passenger car. So you're out in the middle of traffic anyhow, contending with people coming out of the Toyota dealership, it's the Toyota dealership as well.
And we already know that, I knew the PM peak was bad because I don't live too far from here, but I'm not here for the AM peak, but some of the operators said that the AM with the high school is pretty busy as well.
It is.
Hey, Amanda, is there a roundabout plan for that intersection in the future?
I believe so. I can pull up the map and check.
Okay.
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be fantastic.
That would be, yeah.
That would all, I think, be tied into the Highway 64 when they input the interchanges in.
Never mind.
At
That's never gonna happen. Sorry.
Pine and Laura Duncan, then the improvements at Pine Plaza and those streets would occur in that same general schedule, but not before that.
But we could probably build it and not have it get torn up, the overpass, right?
I would not want to speak to that because of just how much might be changing in that area.
Yeah, my understanding is they would still need land dedication to build the roundabout and things like that. And so I don't know if it would be, I don't want to approach separating it out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But there is a roundabout on, I just confirmed, the roundabout is shown on our map there.
That'd be great to have in the future. Okay.
Yeah, that's going away. Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any other questions. I know we talked about weekend service. We actually got word that our operator shortage is getting better. We needed 85 riders to do the service changes in August. We are right at 85 riders. We probably will hold off on the weekend service right at the beginning of August, but we think we're going to be able to put it in place before the next service change in January. So that will probably happen sometime in the fall. We'd like to get a little bit of buffer, but we don't want to be right at that number. We would much rather wait and have that service happen when we know we've got enough operators than put the service in place and then miss trips. That really doesn't, but that's not a good PR thing. It's not good for the passengers. So we're going to wait on that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there's a recommended action in place.
Yeah, and just one other note is just that the transit plan map does not speak to bus stops in particular, but Go Triangle already has it in their planning to make improvements to the proposed bus stops that they're showing. So that wouldn't be a town project. Go Triangle is already planning on installing those bus stops. My understanding in the short term is that it's just going to be a sign, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, so for the initial change, we're going to just put in signs. We figure they're not fully ADA compliant, but we've got sidewalks. We'll go ahead and put them in. These are federally funded stops that we got through the Capital Area MPO. They just went to Atlanta for their NEPA screening. We expect all of them to be categorical exclusions, and we should be able to get to work as soon as we get that word back from Atlanta. Some of them have already gone into basic design. I think I don't know if they've been surveyed yet, but they're all in the queue to be surveyed and designed regardless of where the federal part stands, because it helps us answer the Fed's questions if we get a little bit of that work done ahead of time.
Can I ask a silly question? Is there any particular reason why you have to hit those stops in both directions in order to, like, aren't there bus routes throughout the country that only have certain stops on a north or a south or east or a west direction?
We do that where we have loops, but where we have service in both directions, we always try to have a paired stop, because in theory, if somebody gets on later on, they want to get off at the same place. If it's a home-based work trip, again, they're going to get on at home, but when they get home at night, they need to be able to get off the bus. So it's been our policy to always try to have at least a paired stop. They might not be directly across from each other. We also try to make sure there's an ADA compliant crossing between paired stops where we have them. But where we have loops, we will be in just one direction. Some of this service change down in Holly Springs involves a loop down at the Walmart, and we're only doing one side of the road there.
So this change does eliminate the only transit access that exists currently to the library.
If you're willing to cross 64.
Yeah, so there is no crosswalk at 64. And there's no stops along 64. So the folks would be essentially coming from the same place.
Just
Yeah.
significantly farther away, but yeah, I mean, I was just pointing it out that we don't have any short-term plan to address any sort of access to the library.
Maybe Route 2?
Yeah, I was going to say, ultimately, I think that does fall on our shoulders to provide that access, not Go Triangle.
Yeah.
You know, I think within the boundaries of thinking of 64 and 1 being a wedge, you know, I think that's our bailiwick, and that's where we should really force our efforts into the 2025. So Route 2A.
You see my map, right? It's,
Oh, I've seen your maps.
You guys do.
I
I have maps, by the way, guys, and I've only sent it to him because I don't want to bias everybody else, but I think they're pretty good maps. So
It's very good maps.
once we start thinking about the future, yeah.
One of them stops right in front of your house, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, you know,
Are you concerned about the left on the Pine Plaza from heading
that's signal control.
heading
isn't it?
west,
So that it's heading west.
turning west onto Pine Plaza?
No, not that much. Our operators, they do that now, and they said it's not an issue. I mean, during peak, it's an issue, but everywhere is an issue at peak. It's the triangle.
It's a tight turn for a big bus, but it's not a horrible one.
Yeah, it's actually that inbound turn with the right is actually the tougher of the two. And then they have
Yep.
to get across the lanes of traffic to make the left. That's the one that they're talking about, along with that unprotected on 64. In other news, I think we now have every stop in Apex queued up, at least on the 305, to be ADA compliant. We've got funding for all of them. The last batch was Campo 2025, and I just got word that that has gone to NCDOT for we have to flex the money from Federal Highway to Federal Transit, and it's gone from the MPO to DOT, and DOT has submitted the request to FTA. So those will be the last few, and most of those are in the wedge. So those will be the last ones to get done. There's also 2 stops that are going in just before you get to Holly Springs on the old 55 that are being done by NCDOT as part of one of the bonus allocation projects from 540. They agreed to go ahead and just put in the landings for us.
How
So
far
they-
into Holly Springs do you go with the 305 route?
Right now, it only goes into downtown Holly Springs, but with this service change, it's going to go all the way through, and it's going to also serve the Rex Hospital and the Walmart Harris Teeter area.
Great.
Is there a bus stop policy about like shelters and benches? Because we have an Apex now. Is there a Go Triangle version?
Yeah, there is. We have shelter and bench warrants. And in fact, it's one of the things Katie and I have talked about. I know that Apex likes to put benches at their stops as much as possible. 2 things that Go Triangle has to watch out for. One is if it forces us to have to acquire right-of-way, the delay goes up quite a bit. So we say if we can fit a bench in the right-of-way, we're happy to accommodate. But if we have to buy right-of-way, we're going to just make sure we do the ADA compliance first, and the bench can come down the road. The other thing we have to pay attention to as a regional agency is if we go and put benches in Apex, but not in Durham, we could run afoul of some civil rights stuff and some Title VI. So we do have to pay attention to that. So far, it hasn't been a problem, but it's on our radar enough that we're sensitive to it. And if it starts to be too much, we can't necessarily afford to put benches in all of our stops all around the triangle. And we wouldn't want the feds to come back and say, how come you guys are putting stops in Apex and you're not putting them in Durham? And we just have to be cognizant of that.
Is there a policy that the county or the municipality can supplement that to get the benches if we
Well,
want?
yeah, we'd never stop you until you know. If you would like to do it, we are happy to have you do it.
I just figured that the ridership in Apex is less. We have more cars in Apex than like maybe Durham does, and people probably need a little more comfort to be willing to ride.
Yeah, I think off the top of my head, our seating warrant is 10 boardings per day, average weekday, and our shelter warrant is either 20 or 25. I have to deal with a lot of systems, and I always forget where the threshold is, including our own. So I think ours is 25, but we'll go ahead at 20 in many cases and just say we'll match. I think that's Durham's, and Chapel Hill's warrants are really convoluted and have like multivariate things they look at, so they're always a challenge to work with. Raleigh's shelter warrant is now 10 average boardings a day, so it's different in every place in the triangle.
And if there are multiple routes, how does that work with the calculation?
We get a net ridership at the stop level, at least for our trips. In cases where we have shared stops, we'll ask for ridership data from the other provider as well.
Thank you so much for the information and time today. Appreciate it.
Always let it come to you. It's not fun. It's 10 minutes from the house, even in bad traffic.
That's
There you
good. Well,
go.
you can always take the bus.
I thought about riding a bike, but I looked at the temperature.
Yeah, no.
So at this point, what we were planning to do is provided you don't have any, recommend or changes or concerns with this, is to plan to bring this to planning board and town council for a proposed transit plan map amendment in August. So the request before you from staff is to make that recommendation, essentially.
And the recommendation to town council that they approve the proposed transit plan map amendment to show Route 305 changes along Lower Duncan Road and Pine Plaza Drive. Discussion? Do I have a motion? Oh, sorry.
One discussion item, I already mentioned it, but just thinking back when we were planning Route 1, I recall that, the rationale for excluding access to the library along that route was that at least it was accessible via 305. And now that's going away, and we don't have a plan to address it yet. I wouldn't oppose this change just on the basis of that, but you know, that should be a top priority for this group, you know, based on our previous rationale for not including it in Route 1.
I agree. Motion to recommend?
So made.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Good to go.
Just a logistical note, I have a form that you'll need to sign so that we can attach it to our
Gotcha.
planning board staff report. So, okay, I'll get that after the meeting.
Okay. Transit plan updates.
Okay, and I can go pretty quickly through
Okay.
this. I just wanted to keep you all aware of the progress on the Wake Transit Plan update. I'm pretty sure at the January meeting, I gave a broad overview of this. Basically, I think it's every 4 years, the Wake County Transit Plan becomes due for an update, and that process kicked off around January. It is going to go through, I think, about another year or so. But what the main tasks are on this timeline are the kind of phase 1 engagement, giving the public an update on what we've done so far as a county in terms of, you know, raising and spending this money for transit. Determining any changes to the goals or strategic direction, which is going to be in the form of sort of like a scenario planning exercise. And then, you know, moving towards more of the actual like financial details of where should money be spent into the future. So the discussion right now is really talking about trade-offs that this plan has to consider, essentially for the big ticket items that the county might want to consider, like commuter rail service, bus rapid transit, et cetera, and some of, you know, these other things that also cost money. As far as the state of the plan right now, about 200 million has really been spent at this point on transit services in the county, with a majority of that being more revenue hours, so paying operators for operating more service, buying more buses to operate extended service. Doing a lot of planning and project preparation work for bus rapid transit, and then paying for administration, bus stop improvements, and a tiny bit down there is where we fit into local funding. So at this point, through FY23, the program has raised about $750 million. From 16 to 23, and that about 200 million has been spent. A lot more of that is encumbered in some way, either as a required funding reserve, as capital carryover for projects we know aren't going to be spent, like the bus rapid transit projects in Raleigh, and just kind of placeholders right now for commuter rail that are just placeholders. So the update on commuter rail is there was a feasibility, a more refined feasibility study for the line going from Durham to Clayton. And then it basically found that the costs and feasibility are not as good as hoped. And it's kind of a decision point in this plan, and not just for this plan, but in our region, and Paul could probably speak to this if we asked him to. Just, you know, what is kind of the next step for this? BRT has been progressing pretty much on schedule, and The Newburn corridor is actually going through the construction bid process right now to actually get construction started, hopefully later this year. And then they're kind of going stepwise, down the ranks of the 4 identified projects. So the Southern Corridor, which kind of goes down 401, would be next, and then the corridor that goes to Cary is after that, and then they're still kind of refining the planning work for the Northern Corridor, which goes up like Capitol Boulevard. And, well, there's kind of 2 different options at this point, but yeah, so they're working on that. So those are progressing. I think I've already spoken to this, but basically the idea that's kind of in front of folks right now with this plan update is, there's going to be another $700 million to $1 billion of funding raised in the next 10 years or so, and how do we need to direct that? So there is a survey out right now. If you've already taken it, thank you. But this is not the survey for Go Apex, it's the Wake Transit Plan survey that's available at the link, or I've got in the back of your packet, there's flyers with QR codes that you can take to make sure you tell the project team what your priorities are for transit. We don't have the results yet. The survey is still open and will be open till at least July 20th. So we'll pass on when we hear the results for you all. But so some other aspects of this plan update are an update to the Community Funding Area Program Management Plan. This is basically the rules that guide how Apex and the other community funding areas, so the smaller towns in Wake County, can access the Wake Transit funds to expand transit service. There is a consultant team working on this with Campo. We met with them along with all the other CFA representatives back in February to provide our initial feedback on kind of how the program's going. And in June, they sent out a draft update to the PMP along with a memo kind of outlining what changes they made. The idea is that this program management plan will be updated in maybe late August or September in order for us to use it in the next year's funding cycle. However, there are some things I wanted to mention to you all. So Apex staff have reviewed, and we have several comments and concerns about the draft that was provided to us. I'm just going to be frank, we don't think it's ready to be updated for this coming year, and we're going to keep working with the project team to make sure all of our questions and concerns are resolved. So I'm not going to editorialize too much, but a lot of the things that we provided feedback about and requested changes to didn't appear to be made, which, and a lot of the changes that were made were things we would not have wanted to see. So for example, things that we have access to now, such as some funding support for staffing, as well as marketing funds. So things that money we can seek reimbursement for when we do outreach would no longer be applicable to the projects. So it would be focused more on the provision of service itself, as well as they've provided 3 future funding scenarios for the program, which vary from basically about increasing the amount of funding from the current levels by about 3% to 11% over what we have currently, which we don't feel like is enough to accommodate future projects, not only for Apex, but for the other 10 CFA areas. As we stand right now, not all 11 CFAs would be able to even use this funding because there's not enough to go around. And we feel like this is not enough. So I'm just giving you guys sort of our take on this at this point. We're still talking with Campo about this update.
And Katie, with that, first of all, I think it's more like 5 times more money is needed, something like that, is my opinion. But my second question to you is, was there a discussion about, especially from the areas that are not utilizing this funding right now, this maybe is too far in the weeds for this high level thing, but what level of cost share would they need and they think their town councils would be fine with to start doing local bus service there? Because right now it's half and half, and we only have a few takers, it seems like, out of the 11 or whatever it is. And I'm wondering, is it 80-20? Would that be enough to get Holly Springs on board? Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can only share what I've heard informally, in discussions. I don't think anyone has made like a formal, this is what we need kind of comment yet. But I have heard, especially the smaller municipalities are interested in a higher or a lower local match option. Just because, that 50% is still a hurdle for them to get over. And one person did suggest maybe an 80-20, but I don't know how all the CFAs feel. But I've heard that suggested.
Okay, I think there'd be a value in a collective letter to, I guess it's Go Triangle, whoever it is, saying we collectively would like this number to be the cost share. And that might move it more than just Apex or Wendell or whoever individually saying it. Maybe I'm wrong to suggest this or not.
Not us, it's the Wake TPAC.
It's the what?
What is it, Transit TPAC?
Oh, okay.
Transit Planning Advisory Committee.
How long would that proposal last? This is getting in the weeds, but in other words, if a smaller municipality was only asked to invest 20%, then how long are other municipalities that are paying 50% gonna be okay with it?
No, I'm saying, I would think the letter would suggest everybody from now on pay, and you increase the amount first of all, and then you say everybody from now on pays 80-20, and Apex would grow their system, but Holly Springs might do one with that in that scenario, versus we may grow still, but Holly Springs is doing 0, and I don't know if they're gonna plan on doing any without more cost share. And Fuquay, whoever, there's 11 or 12 of them, and only 3 or 4 are doing it, even with the money being paid for half. And that's, to me, an indictment that it's not enough of a cost share. So, I don't know if this committee wants to get involved in that at all, but I think a joint letter, if we could pull that off, would have more impact than individual opinions.
Apex staff specifically requested an additional meeting with Campo and all of the CFAs to discuss this, which, based on the doodle polls, is looking like it's going to happen in early August. So that could be a discussion point that we have with the group of all the CFA reps.
I mean, it may be bold, but us composing a letter that then every town council then signs, or transit committees, I guess they don't have them in other places, but we get the ball rolling maybe with a letter that get them all signed. That'd be impactful, I think, to the county commissioner, who I assume ultimately makes the decision. And a joint letter would be, I think, pretty effective. And we can say what we want in that letter and see if they'll all sign on to it.
Yeah, and Campo has indicated that if we run into more significant hurdles, we might have some sort of interim option for this fall, so that we could keep, the application process going, while potentially more discussions are had about what the long-term, update would be for the program.
Thanks. Sorry, guys.
I will editorialize a little bit, because the CFA program is less than 1% of the total Wake Transit funding pot. So, increasing that by 3% is, still less than 1%. So that's just one aspect of where staff is coming from on this. We make up 22+% of the population. Okay. We also have a stakeholder advisory committee with this plan update that is organized by Campo, which is meant as another way to gather input from all the different localities. The first meeting was held at the end of May. Mr. Gant was there, Mr. Jimmy Torres, who we had asked to help represent Apex, attended as well. He's the outreach coordinator for Fiesta Cristiana, which is it's a faith-based organization, but they do a lot of outreach to the Hispanic community in town. And he graciously agreed to kind of help represent us with the stakeholder advisory committee. I attended as well, just to make sure I understood, this whole committee and process. We kind of tested out the survey and talked about the state of the plan and this idea of trade-offs. Mr. Gant, do you have any thoughts or comments from that first meeting?
I think the Durham to Raleigh train's dead for this plan, but I'm hopeful that the money they were saving to possibly do something like that is going to go toward, I think BRT is the main thing, but the community fundings are what Katie and I were identical in our preferences, which there were like 20 choices, and we were identical in what we spend the money on. And there were a lot of other municipalities there that I think had somewhat similar thoughts, maybe not exactly the same as us, but so I think there's going to be, I think the public wants a train, but the reality of the trade-offs is it just doesn't make sense, I don't think, from this plan's point of view. And so I think that will be reflected in the update.
Cost mainly, just so expensive.
Yeah. Maybe I'll also add, there was a lot of, I think, places like Nightdale and maybe Garner, these places, they had a different point of view as far as like connectivity to like Johnston County that I don't think we even think about here. I mean, Pittsboro, maybe in the long future might be a connected place in Chatham, but I don't think that was not a concern at all for me, is thinking about inter-county connectivity. There was also discussion about like buses connecting like Apex and Holly Springs, Apex and Cary, that I think got a lot of traction with that group. That I personally am thinking more about the local, getting that built up, instead of thinking about trying to get to, like, I don't think I'd take the bus to Holly Springs. Most people I don't think would too often. I think we're more likely to go into Raleigh or Cary from Apex to work or to shop or whatever. But I think other places had a little different point of view of that. They thought the non-major city connections were important. So that might end up being an enhanced part of the plan as well in the end. And you can take the survey. I actually took it also myself, and it kind of is very similar to what we did as a group. Yeah.
So the next meeting of that group is scheduled for August or September, where they'll provide updates about the results of that survey and the spring engagement, and start talking through possible investment scenarios for the plan update. That will go out then for another round of public engagement later, I guess this fall, or maybe early winter. So that's all I had on that.
Okay. Informational updates.
So these, I have a packet for you to review in your own time. And please let me know if you have any questions about the performance data. It's just like, it's Go Apex data and then project updates about trans-related items in town.
2024 is looking better than 2023, which is an encouraging sign, graphically speaking.
Yeah, so we're, I think, averaging about 20 to 30% higher ridership this year than last year.
And that boarding cost is down.
Fantastic growth year over year.
Yeah,
20 to 30%.
yep. Great.
Katie, can you discuss the FY25 budget and how this group, what their next year looks like in your vision of it?
So, okay, a couple updates with that. So for the CFA program, we will continue to receive a 50% match for our operating of Go Apex. And we also anticipate, but have not received final approval yet, that we'll get another round of bus stop improvement matching grants. So another total of $200,000 for bus stop improvements. One thing what we did not anticipate until very recently is that the FY24 budget we had for bus stop improvements kind of got eaten up by increased costs for our existing CDBG funded bus stop improvement project to add shelters for identified stops. We thought it would be totally covered by the money that the county had secured, but guess what? Construction costs go up really high. And we had to use that money to cover it. So we'll still be looking to do bus stop improvements in FY25 with that budget as soon as that goes through. We also have, and if you haven't seen it yet, the new next year's town budget and CIP were released. It's pretty favorable to transit, I would say. There is funding in there for us to start working on design for additional bus stops, should we need that for new service options that come about. And then the year after in the CIP, I believe, has the funding to actually build them. So there's kind of a path set in place in the town's budget for us to expand service. At this point, we don't have that particular project yet because we're looking to finish our prioritization study and get more feedback from council. Is there anything in particular you wanted me to speak to?
I mean, you guys went through a process to do Route 1. I wasn't part of it, but I heard it was pretty rigorous. I mean, when are they going to be? Are they going to be working on like the next steps as a committee?
That's a good question. Okay, so
if and when, I guess.
Yeah, so the timeline for the prioritization study has kind of gone out a little further than I originally expected, and I'm aiming to finish that by the end of this year. So then we would have a better idea of what we do want to do next, which would then, depending on what that is, require either an internal service planning study or potentially one where we may need some consultant support, which would potentially be a additional planning study through the CFA program, which is one of the options we can pursue. Excuse me, my throat has dried up. So in the immediate term, I don't see us really going too deep into it, but as we get into the spring, that could be a lot more discussions about what direction we want to take with that.
Unfortunately, you mentioned the rigor of coming up with Route 1 to begin with. There's a lot of things that we had to weigh and balance for that we won't have to do for a second route. I mean, we know what our expectations are as far as a fare goes, or no fare, fare free. We know what our expectations are as from a philosophical version of who we want to serve with this next route. So there's a lot of things that we don't have to reinvent for the next phase, which I think is going to hopefully push us to a little bit quicker turnaround for something new and different in next year's planning. Other business. So we've come up with the next special meeting is August 21st, 4 p.m. And our regularly scheduled meeting will be October 9th. One note from me is that August 21st will be my final meeting with the Transit Committee. I'm having to step down for health-related reasons, and so we will be in need of a chairman, and possibly as we move people, as some people move off, we're going to try to solicit other members to come on board, bringing some fresh eyes, fresh blood, fresh thoughts. But this has been an amazing journey for me, and I appreciate all your all's patience, and especially Katie and Shannon and Jenna for keeping me on the straight and narrow and producing what I think we produced is a fine product for this Go Apex Route 1. But if there's any other questions or concerns, that'll be something we'll bring up at the meeting in August.
Stuart,
thank you, Stuart.
yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Your passion for transit has been a true value to this committee. Your knowledge of and experience with transit has been highly informative for me personally. And I think we're going to be at a loss without you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm always looking for a free ride somewhere, so. Keep it fare free, that's all I ask.
Yeah, and as chair, it's been really great to have somebody who is consistently excited and here for transit, so, yeah.
You dangle shiny things in front of me, I get very excited. We are adjourned.
I don't think
Not
we
too
all
bad.
need to say it, but you really have done an amazing.
There's
Good run, Stuart.
so many moving parts that work so well together, I have to admit.
Good run.
It has been fun. I can't wait to see Go Apex Route Grant, I think that's what we're gonna call it, or Gant, Route Gant.
It does stop near my house,
No,
only
it does.
because I've approved